Single Dad Max Carter thought it was just another rainy delivery, until the woman behind the penthouse door turned out to be the one person who could rewrite his entire future. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? The rain had started sometime after sunset, soft at first, like a whisper against the windshield, but now it hammered the glass in sheets, relentless and cold. Max Carter squinted through the blur, the old wipers groaning in protest as they smeared the storm more than they cleared it. The dashboard light blinked an ominous orange warning. Low fuel. Again. He gave it a tired glance but didn't slow down. Not yet. Not with 2 more deliveries to go. The smell of fried rice filled the car, mingling with the faint scent of wet wool from his jacket. He reached over and adjusted the cardboard bag, making sure the containers were upright. One spill meant a complaint. One complaint meant another black mark on his profile. Too many black marks and the app would drop him, just like that. "Hang in there, buddy," he muttered, giving the steering wheel a small pat, as if the car could hear him. The heater barely worked, but it was better than nothing. Water dripped steadily onto his knee from a leak in the roof. He'd shoved a rag up there, but it hadn't helped much. Not that he expected it to. Repairs cost money. Money he didn't have. His phone buzzed in the cracked cradle. Another order, another name, another address. Penthouse. Figures. He sighed, rubbing at his temple as the glow of downtown drew closer. Lila would be asleep by now. He'd left her with Mrs. Hernandez, the neighbor who never asked questions and always saved him a plate. He was grateful for her, even if he hated having to ask. A traffic light turned red. Max stopped and leaned his head back against the seat just for a second. His eyelids fluttered. He was so damn tired. The light turned green. He exhaled and drove on. Somewhere between the weight of responsibilities and the hum of the rain, Max told himself this was just a phase, just a rough patch. He'd get back on his feet, somehow. But as he pulled up to the towering glass building and stared at the glowing number 47 next to Penthouse, he felt something shift inside him. He didn't know it yet, but this delivery wasn't like the others. The order came through just as Max was about to sign off for the night. A single item, paid in full, with a tip that made him blink twice. $50 for 1 bowl of tomato soup. No special notes, no contactless drop-off, just an address that made his stomach sink. The Glass Well. Everyone in the city knew it. 47 floors of mirrored wealth rising above the skyline, like it didn't belong to the same world the rest of them lived in. Max had only been there once, years ago, back when he worked for a catering company that needed warm bodies in bow ties. He remembered marble floors, quiet elevators, and the way people looked right through you. He almost didn't accept it. He'd already done enough miles for one night, and Lila's fuzzy socks were still in the passenger seat. He always meant to take them in. But that tip, $50. That was groceries. That was gas. That was maybe not saying no when Lila asked for one of those frosted cookies at the bakery window. So he tapped accept and turned the car toward the downtown. By the time he reached the Glass Well, the rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the sky stayed thick and gray. The lobby was hushed and spotless, glowing with warm light that made him feel even more out of place. He approached the concierge desk, soup bag in hand, water still dripping from the sleeves of his jacket. "Delivery for Anne," he said, feeling ridiculous. No last name, no unit number, just Anne. The concierge didn't blink. "Penthouse," she said simply, reaching for a keycard. "You'll need this to access the top floor. Elevators to your right." He took it with a quiet nod, ignoring the way his scuffed sneakers squeaked on the marble. The elevator ride felt impossibly smooth and weirdly silent. As the floors ticked upward, 30, 38, 44, Max's nerves buzzed. This place wasn't built for people like him. Not the leaky car, not the secondhand jacket, not the man balancing delivery gigs and a daughter he loved more than anything. The doors opened with a soft chime. He stepped into a hallway so quiet he could hear the rain on the glass windows, and then, at the far end, A single door. He approached slowly, knocked once, and waited. The door opened slower than Max expected, like whoever was behind it had hesitated, unsure. For a moment he considered that maybe no one would answer, that the order had been a mistake or a prank. But then, there she was. A woman stood in the doorway, barefoot on polished wood floors, wrapped in an oversized gray sweater that hung just past her thighs. Her chestnut hair, slightly damp, clung to the sides of her face in soft waves. A single strand curved across her cheek, and she didn't bother to tuck it behind her ear. Her eyes, clear and startlingly sharp, met his for a beat too long before dropping to the bag in his hands. "Soup?" she asked, her voice low, husky, as if she hadn't used it in hours. "Yeah," Max said, holding the bag out. "Tomato, right? No croutons." She nodded, stepping aside just enough for him to see past her into the apartment. No, the penthouse. It was stunning, but strangely dim. The curtains were drawn, the lights were low. It felt less like a palace and more like someone had been hiding inside it for too long. He caught a glimpse of a sleek black couch, a stack of books on the floor, and a flickering fireplace that looked far too real to be electric. She took the bag carefully, like it might fall apart in her hands. "Thanks," she murmured. "No problem," he replied, hesitating. She looked like someone trying very hard not to fall apart. There was a pause, a silence too thick for strangers. "You're soaked," she said suddenly, noticing the wet patches on his shoulders and the drip of water from his collar. "Occupational hazard," Max joked, forcing a smile. She didn't laugh, but her mouth curved almost right. For a moment he thought she might say something else, but she only stepped back, still holding the bag like it mattered more than it should. "Have a good night," she said, softer this time. Max nodded. "You too, Anne." The name sat oddly in his mouth. He turned and walked back to the elevator, but as the doors slid shut behind him, he glanced back one last time. She was still there, watching. Max stepped out of the elevator and into the lobby, the warmth of the building instantly swallowed by the cold waiting on the other side of the glass doors. He didn't check his phone until he was back in the car, the engine coughing to life beneath his fingers. 1 bar of gas left. He sighed, tapped open the delivery app, and scrolled to the completed order. No tip. $50 had been there when the order came in. But now, 0. Nothing. He stared at the screen for a long second, jaw tight. For all her quiet grace and tired eyes, Anne had just joined the list of people who thought guys like him didn't matter. He was used to it, used to being invisible. Still stung, though. He tossed the phone onto the passenger seat and pulled away from the curb. Upstairs, Ava sat curled on the couch, the soup untouched beside her. Her fingers hovered over her phone. She could still send it. She meant to send it. She'd just forgotten. Her mind was elsewhere, the way it always was lately, spinning through old memories, old headlines, old betrayals. She closed her eyes and leaned back, breathing deep. But guilt slipped in like a draft under a locked door. Downstairs, Max hit a red light. Rain tapped the windshield in uneven rhythms, a soft and steady reminder that he should have been home by now. He didn't even know why this one bothered him more than the others. Maybe it was the way she'd looked at him, like she saw something and then looked away before it settled. His phone buzzed, a message from the app. Customer added a note. "Sorry, forgot to include tip earlier. I'll fix it. Stay dry." He blinked, then smiled, just a little. A minute later, another message popped up. Tip received, $0. No update, no fix, just silence. Max chuckled under his breath, shook his head, and whispered to himself, "Figures." But he didn't get angry. He didn't fume. Instead, he leaned back at the next stoplight, stared out into the rain, and whispered the same thing he always told Lila when things didn't go their way. Kindness doesn't come with receipts. And with that, he drove on. The rain hadn't let up. If anything, it had deepened into a steady, unrelenting rhythm, a soft percussion against the windshield that matched the quiet ache in Max's chest. He kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting against the door, fingers absently tapping to the hum of the heater, fighting a losing battle against the cold. The city lights blurred into streaks through the fogged-up glass, like the world itself was tired and smudged. He didn't mind the late nights, not really. It was the coming home part that got to him, the way silence always filled the apartment before it gave way to a little girl's sleepy voice or the rustle of blankets on the couch. He turned onto the side street leading to their complex. The familiar sight of the old, flickering porch light felt like an exhale. Second floor, third window, from the left. He always looked up at it like a habit, like a prayer. By the time he unlocked the apartment door, it was nearly 10. The scent of spaghetti warmed the air, leftovers, reheated, probably by Mrs. Hernandez, and the low sound of a cartoon still playing on the small living room TV filled the quiet. Max stepped inside, shaking rain from his shoulders and closing the door behind him with care. Lila sat curled on the couch, wrapped in a blanket with cartoon ducks on it, her head turned the second she heard the door. "Daddy," she whispered, not loud, not excited, just relieved. Max smiled and crouched down, opening his arms. She ran into them, blanket and all. "You stayed up," he murmured into her hair. "You said you'd be home before 10. He pulled back to look at her. "Did I?" She nodded solemnly. "Spaghetti's in the microwave. I saved you the piece with the most cheese." His chest tightened. "Thanks, Bug." She followed him into the kitchen, bare feet patting against the tile. Max reheated the plate, then sat at the counter while Lila leaned her head against his side. "You look tired," she said. "I am. Did you help someone today?" He thought of the penthouse, the woman, the silence. "Yeah," he said softly. "I think I did." And though he couldn't explain why, the weight in his chest felt just a little bit heavier as the rain continued to fall. The soup had long gone cold. Ava hadn't touched it. It sat on the marble kitchen island, steam a memory, beside an untouched glass of water and a napkin folded so precisely it might have belonged to someone else entirely. The penthouse was quiet, too quiet. But she didn't turn on any music. She never did anymore. Silence, at least, didn't lie. She stood barefoot by the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the rain trace delicate, wandering paths down the glass. Below, the city buzzed like it always did, oblivious and alive. From up here, it all looked distant, manageable. But she knew better. Ava turned away, clutching her phone, thumb hovering over the lock screen, where a row of unread notifications waited like vultures. Her stomach twisted. She didn't want to look, but she tapped anyway. Lane Technologies faces scrutiny after boardroom shakeup. Where is Ava Lane? Silence from former CEO raises questions. Investors react to sudden resignation and mysterious disappearance. She closed the tabs, one by one, deleted them, force-quit the app, tossed the phone onto the couch with more force than necessary. Her name, her real name, had become a headline, a target, a talking point. She paced the room, then crossed to the bookshelf, reaching for a silver-framed photo. It was old, the edges were worn. She picked it up carefully, like it might break if she touched it wrong. Her father stood beside her in the picture, one arm resting protectively on her shoulder, both of them in lab coats and safety goggles, smiling in front of a prototype that would later revolutionize hybrid engines. He had believed in progress, in innovation, in her. And she'd left all of it, not because she wanted to, because she had to. The betrayal hadn't come from outsiders. It came from the people she trusted most. When they tried to sell off what her father had built to the highest bidder, she walked, quietly, disappeared, gave them no chance to spin it, no press conference, no parting words, just gone. Now she was Anne, eating soup alone and ordering takeout like she didn't once sit on Forbes's cover. She set the photo down gently and rubbed her temples. The man who delivered her dinner tonight, He hadn't known who she was, and for the first time in weeks, that felt like relief. The scent of scorched bread filled the apartment like a silent alarm. Max yanked open the toaster and waved the smoke away with a dish towel, coughing as the blackened slices popped up, stiff as cardboard. Lila sat at the table in her pajamas, swinging her feet and drawing smiley faces in the condensation on her juice glass. "That one's extra crispy," she said, grinning. Max held up the toast like a piece of evidence. "It's artisanal. Charcoal infused. Very trendy." Lila giggled, and the sound cracked something open in his chest. He smiled back, but his mind wasn't really in the kitchen. Not entirely. It was still stuck in the elevator from last night, on the sound of the door opening to that penthouse, on her face, her eyes. "Daddy?" "You're doing the staring thing again." "Am I?" He poured cereal into a bowl, narrowly missing the counter. "Sorry, Bug, long night." "Was the soup lady nice?" He paused. Yeah, she was different. Across the city, Ava stood in her own kitchen, sleek, bright, immaculately designed, though she barely noticed. She moved like someone acting out a familiar script, kettle on, loose leaf tea in a strainer, a splash of oat milk in her favorite mug. Her fingers trembled only slightly as she stirred. Last night had stirred something else entirely. She couldn't remember the last time someone had looked her in the eye and spoken to her like she was normal. Not Ms. Lane, not CEO, just a person. He hadn't asked questions. He hadn't pushed. He hadn't even flinched at the awkwardness of standing in a penthouse with wet shoes and a bag of soup. And when she forgot to tip, she winced at the thought. He hadn't snapped or sulked. He'd just left. Calm, kind. She leaned against the counter, tea warming her hands, eyes unfocused. She didn't even know his name. Max dropped Lila off at school 30 minutes later, the taste of burnt toast still lingering. As he drove away, he glanced at his phone. No new orders yet. But something inside him, the same part that watched raindrops trace their way across glass, kept thinking of her. And on opposite ends of the city, both of them wondered the same thing. Would they ever see each other again? The cursor blinked on the screen, waiting for her to type. Ava sat at the kitchen island, laptop open, hair pulled into a loose bun that hadn't seen a mirror all day. The same cup of tea from hours earlier sat cold beside her, untouched. Rain tapped gently on the windows again, not quite as heavy as the night before, but steady, like a presence she couldn't shake. She wasn't sure what she was doing. Not really. The delivery app was still open in a separate tab. She'd found him, Max Carter. A quick search through her old order history showed his name in the driver details, tied to that soggy, simple moment of soup and silence. She clicked out of her real profile, Ann Clark, and opened a new one. A burner. Fake name. Fake email. Just enough to keep her off the radar. The idea was ridiculous, borderline obsessive, but it was better than scrolling through articles about herself that only twisted the knife deeper. She stared at the blank address field for a moment, then typed it in. The Glasswell. Same penthouse. But this time, she added a note. If possible, please assign Max C. as my driver. It felt absurd, childish even, but it wasn't about flirting or games. She just wanted to see him again, just to be in the presence of someone who didn't expect anything from her, who hadn't read headlines or shaken hands with her at a conference. Someone who'd looked at her and seen a person, not a brand. She hesitated before placing the order. Her finger hovered over the submit button like it might trigger something larger than lunch. Then she clicked. Done. She sat back in the silence, heart oddly quick. Waiting. Max had just finished a delivery, a soggy bag of tacos to a college kid who barely looked up from his gaming chair, when the ping came in. New order. Penthouse again. He raised an eyebrow. Really? Well, he muttered. But when he saw the customer request his name specifically, a strange feeling stirred in his chest. Confusion. Curiosity. He hit accept, and the rain began again. Max stood outside the penthouse door again, soup in hand, feeling déjà vu settle on his shoulders like the weight of the delivery bag. The hallway was silent, just like last time. The same light hummed above. The same rain tapped the window at the end of the corridor, a steady reminder that some things didn't change. But something felt different. The door opened faster this time, and there she was, no sweater, no fog in her eyes, just Ava, or Anne, wearing a fitted black t-shirt and jeans, hair down and slightly curled from humidity, like she hadn't decided whether to let herself care today. "You again," she said, a soft smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "You asked for me," Max replied, lifting the bag slightly. "Or someone named Anne did." She blinked, then gave a small, knowing shrug. Guilty. He handed over the soup, same order, no croutons, and stepped back, waiting for her to close the door. But she didn't. Instead, she tilted her head. "You want to come in for a second, just to get out of the rain?" Max hesitated, eyebrows raised. "I don't think that's technically in the delivery instructions." "I'll add it to the notes next time," she said, already turning toward the kitchen. "Door's open." Something in her voice was light but tired, like she was trying out a version of herself she wasn't sure she still believed in. He stepped inside. The penthouse was warm, softly lit, with music playing low from speakers he couldn't see. Jazz, maybe, something slow and wordless. She set the soup down and grabbed 2 bottles of water from the fridge, handing him one without asking. "So," she said, leaning against the counter, "tell me something about you, anything. I don't even know your last name." He took the bottle, twisting the cap. "Carter, Max Carter." "Nice to meet you, Max Carter." They stood in silence for a moment, the kind that wasn't awkward, just still. "I'm a single dad," he said eventually. 5-year-old daughter. Her name's Lila. She's smarter than me and eats too many gummy bears when I'm not looking." Ava smiled. "She sounds like good company." "She is," he said quietly. She waited, like maybe he'd ask something in return, but he didn't. He didn't ask who she really was, or why someone who lived in a penthouse ordered soup like a secret, and that, more than anything, made her want to see him again. The rain softened as the evening wore on, tapering to a gentle drizzle that painted the penthouse windows with quiet streaks of silver. Ava sat cross-legged on the floor, leaning against the low edge of the couch, her bowl of soup resting on the coffee table in front of her. Max sat nearby, his back against the opposite armrest, still damp from the outside, but too tired to care. Somehow dinner had turned into takeout for 2. After the soup, he'd offered to pick something else up, joking about her needing actual calories, and she'd surprised herself by saying yes. Now there was a carton of lo mein balanced on her lap, and Max was eating spring rolls straight from the bag like it was second nature. "So let me get this straight," she said, wiping sauce from her lip with a napkin. "You've fixed your car's radiator twice using duct tape and a spoon?" "Technically," Max replied, chewing. "The spoon was part of the fan bracket, but yeah, works like a charm." Ava blinked at him. "That's ridiculous." He shrugged, grinning. "It's creative engineering. You'd be amazed what you can do when you're broke and stubborn." A laugh slipped out of her before she could stop it. Not a polite chuckle, a real laugh, short, sudden, and sharp enough to startle her. She clapped a hand over her mouth like it wasn't supposed to happen, like it had betrayed her carefully cultivated quiet. Max paused, then grinned wider. "There it is." "There what?" she asked, still smiling, but warily now. "The laugh. I knew it was in there somewhere." She leaned her head back against the couch cushion and stared up at the ceiling, the smile lingering like an old friend she hadn't seen in years. "I don't laugh much these days." "Maybe you just needed lo mein and questionable car repairs." Ava looked at him again, her expression softer now, not guarded, just tired in a different way. "You're different than I expected." "Yeah," he said, leaning back. "I get that a lot." They sat in silence for a few more minutes, chewing, thinking. Outside, the storm had finally passed. Inside, something else was beginning. The late afternoon sky hung low and gray, but the rain had taken a break. Max didn't trust it, though. Clouds like that always had more in them. Lila sat in the passenger seat, legs swinging, boots thudding lightly against the glove box. She cradled a travel mug of cocoa in her mittened hands, grinning as she sipped. "Too hot?" Max asked, glancing over. She shook her head. "Just right, like Goldilocks." He smiled. She'd begged to come along on a delivery, and after checking the app and seeing it was that address, he said yes. He wasn't sure why. Maybe part of him wanted Ava to meet the real reason he did what he did every night. Or maybe he just wanted to share a bit of light with her. Lila had that effect on people. When they reached the glass well, Max double-checked the order. Soup again. Same request for him as the driver. No surprises there. As they walked into the building, Lila's eyes widened like they were stepping into a palace. "Daddy," she whispered, "this place smells like lemons and rich people." Max choked back a laugh. "Be cool, Bug." The elevator ride felt longer than usual. Lila held his hand the whole way, cocoa in her other fist like a treasure she didn't want to drop. When the door opened, Ava was already waiting, sweater sleeves pushed to her elbows, hair up in a loose twist, expression unreadable until she saw the small figure peeking from behind Max's leg. "Oh," she said softly, stepping back. "Hi." "This is Lila," Max said. She insisted on tagging along. Lila stepped forward, fearless. "Hi, I brought cocoa. For me, but you can smell it if you want." Ava blinked, then laughed, light and easy, like the sound had found its way back to her since the last time. "Well, thank you. I'll take a whiff." She crouched, breathing in exaggeratedly. Smells like happiness." Lila nodded sagely. "That's because Daddy adds cinnamon." Ava looked up at Max, her eyes warmer than he'd ever seen them. "You didn't say she was a genius?" "I like to keep some surprises," he said, smiling. And as the three of them stood there, steam curling from a chipped mug of cocoa and laughter hanging in the air, Ava felt something stir inside her, something like hope. The coffee shop was quiet, tucked into a corner of the West End, where no one expected to see a billionaire hiding in a hoodie. Ava stirred her drink absently, gaze fixed on the frothy swirl of oat milk and espresso, though her mind was miles away. She'd started venturing out a little more lately, brief walks, errands, takeout picked up by hand instead of sent to her door. Small steps toward normal, whatever that meant now. She wore no makeup, no jewelry. Her hair was tied in a loose knot beneath a gray beanie. She'd ditched the designer coats and silk scarves weeks ago. In this neighborhood, she looked like any other tired woman trying to disappear into her coffee. It should have been safe. She was halfway through her drink when she heard it, a voice behind her. Familiar. Too familiar. "Miss Lane?" Her blood froze. The name hit like a slap. She turned slowly, carefully, every muscle tensed beneath the hoodie. And there he was. Mitchell Crane, corporate snake in a tailored coat. He worked PR at Lane Technologies. He was at the table during her last board meeting, the one where they tried to sell her father's legacy to a conglomerate that cared more about profit margins than innovation. "Sorry," she said quickly, lowering her gaze. "You must have me confused with someone else." He stared at her, frowning slightly, like a song lyric stuck just out of reach. "No, Wait, are you sure?" "I get that a lot," she murmured, rising from her seat and pulling her bag close. "Have a good day." She slipped past him out the door into the biting air. Her lungs burned, her pulse thumped against her temples. "Don't look back, just keep walking." She made it around the corner before ducking into an alley behind a florist's shop, hands braced against the cold brick wall, breath fogging the air. Her heart pounded like a warning bell. She'd gotten away this time, but the past had a long reach, and now she knew it was only a matter of time before it caught up. The rain had started again, soft and steady, just as Max pulled up to the glass well for the midday drop-off. He glanced over at Lila in the back seat, already slipping her little raincoat over her arms with the kind of determination only a 5-year-old could muster. Sunday mornings were usually their quiet time: cartoons, pancakes, laundry, but this delivery had been a surprise. No request this time, just an address, the same one. When they reached the top floor, Ava was already at the door, barefoot in black leggings and an oversized sweater that slid off one shoulder like it had somewhere better to be. She looked different today, more relaxed somehow, like she hadn't been hiding for the past few months. Like maybe, just maybe, she wanted to be found. "You're getting soaked," she said, eyes flicking to the wet spots darkening Max's sleeves. Wouldn't be the first time. Ava hesitated, then opened the door wider. "Come in, both of you. I was just making pancakes." Max blinked. "Wait, real pancakes? Not the takeout kind?" She smiled. "Real ones, with blueberries." Lila's eyes lit up. "Blueberries are my second favorite. Chocolate chip is first." Max laughed. "I think we're being kidnapped." "Temporarily," Ava said. "I'll return you with full stomachs." Inside, the penthouse smelled like butter and vanilla. Lila kicked off her rain boots with practiced ease and wandered toward the open kitchen, peering up at the marble counter like she'd stepped into a fairy tale. "Daddy," she whispered loudly, "this place is way shinier than ours." Max grinned. "Don't touch anything gold." Ava crouched beside Lila, her tone soft. "Do you want to help me flip the next pancake?" Lila nodded eagerly, her curls bouncing. "Are you the pretty soup lady?" Ava blinked, then laughed. A bright, genuine sound that filled the entire room. "I guess I am." Max met her eyes across the counter. There was something unspoken there, a warmth, a thread pulling tighter. As Lila climbed onto a step stool and Ava guided her tiny hands with care, Max leaned back against the kitchen island, watching them both. And for the first time in a long time, the storm outside didn't feel so heavy. The elevator hummed quietly as it climbed toward the penthouse, its soft glow reflecting off the mirrored walls. Max stood beside Ava, hands tucked into the pockets of his worn jacket, the faint scent of motor oil still clinging to him despite the rain. Lila had stayed with Mrs. Hernandez for the afternoon, which meant, for the first time, it was just the two of them. They hadn't said much at first, but the silence wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like the kind that lets you breathe a little deeper. "Thanks for the pancakes," Max said finally, glancing over. Ava smiled. "Thanks for letting Lila take over my kitchen. I haven't seen that much flour on my floor, ever." "She only gets messy when she likes someone," and he said, half teasing. "So consider yourself approved." Ava looked down, the smile lingering. "She's something special." "She's everything," Max said, more serious now. "She's the reason I work nights and weekends, why I haven't quit even when I wanted to, why I keep going, even when I don't know how." Ava turned slightly, watching him as the numbers above the door ticked upward. "What would you do," she asked, "if you could stop delivering food tomorrow? Like, if money weren't an issue?" Max laughed under his breath, like the question was a trick. "You mean if I won the lottery, or woke up in someone else's life? I mean, if anything was possible." He hesitated, then spoke slowly. "I'd open a garage, my own shop. Not just for repairs, something real, honest, fair prices, good people. The kind of place where folks don't get taken advantage of." Ava studied him. He wasn't pitching a fantasy. He was sharing a blueprint carved out of long nights and hard choices. "I even have a name picked out," he added sheepish. "Carter and Co. The Co is for Lila." The elevator dinged softly. They'd arrived. She didn't move right away. "That sounds like something people need," she said quietly. Max glanced at her, surprised by the weight in her voice. She met his gaze, not with pity, not with curiosity, but with something closer to consideration, like she was filing it away for later. They stepped into the hallway. The air between them changed, warmed by something more than shared soup or pancakes. Something closer to understanding. It started with a spinning circle. Max tapped the delivery app icon for the third time, squinting down at the cracked screen as he sat parked outside a corner deli. Still nothing. Just the eternal swirl of loading purgatory. His signal was fine, battery at 42%, but the app refused to open. "Come on," he muttered, giving the phone a frustrated tap. "Don't do this to me today." He had Lila's school supplies to buy. Rent was due in 4 days. The radiator had started making a sound again, a low, wheezing groan he'd been ignoring out of necessity. He needed this shift. He restarted the phone. No change. 10 minutes later, he gave up and pulled into the nearest Wi-Fi spot just to double-check the app's status. Server error. Temporary outage. Estimated time to restore, unknown. Max leaned his head against the steering wheel and exhaled. Of course. That was when his phone buzzed. Not the app this time, but a message. Unknown. Number. Got your number from the app a while back. If you're not working tonight, I could use a hand. He didn't need to ask who it was. Half an hour later, he stood at Ava's door again, this time with no takeout bag and no official delivery to justify the visit. "You weren't kidding," she said, glancing at his dead-eyed phone screen as he held it up. "App's out, no jobs, no tips, just vibes." She smiled softly and stepped aside. "Come in, I have an idea." Inside, the penthouse was warmer than usual, and not just because of the thermostat. A playlist hummed gently in the background. Piano, soft vocals, something soothing. "I have a list of errands I've been putting off," Ava said, handing him a folded paper. "Dry cleaning, a package to drop at the post office. I hate driving in the city. I'll pay you cash, fair rate." Max looked down at the list, then back at her. "You hiring me as your personal assistant now?" "Temporary consultant," she corrected, a faint smirk playing at her lips. "Flexible hours, attractive boss." He laughed, and something in her chest loosened. It wasn't about the errands, not really. She just wanted more time with him, and now she had a reason. The city below shimmered, awash in gold and silver, as if the rain earlier had polished every surface. From the penthouse balcony, it looked almost unreal, like someone had scattered diamonds across the skyline. Ava stood with her arms resting lightly on the glass railing, eyes drawn not to the buildings or lights, but to the small, crumpled paper boat drifting in a shallow puddle near her feet. It was the third one Lila had made. "I think this one's the fastest yet," Lila announced proudly, kneeling on the balcony floor, her fingers wet from folding and floating her makeshift fleet. "She's an engineer in the making," Max said, crouching beside her. He'd rolled up his sleeves, his forearms smudged faintly with ink from a ballpoint pen Ava had tossed them earlier to decorate their creations. Ava smiled, glancing at the scattering of paper scraps around them, napkins, old receipts, printer paper that had long lost its importance. Now they were ships. Lila had named each one, Hope, Captain Daddy, and the Soup Lady Special. That last one made Ava laugh, really laugh. Max turned toward her, quietly amused. "I think you've been promoted from Pretty Soup Lady. I'll have to update my resume." The air was cool and clean after the rain, the kind of night that felt borrowed from some softer version of the world. No noise from the street, just the occasional honk, the distant hum of life below, and the fluttering sounds of paper boats finding their course across shallow puddles. Lila yawned, then curled up in the blanket Ava had wrapped around her earlier. She lay between them like a link in a chain, her head resting on Ava's knee without a second thought. Max noticed but didn't say anything. He just watched, Ava's hand instinctively moving to Lila's hair, gently brushing a curl away from her face. Above them, stars peeked through the thinning clouds. "I used to think it would take something big to make my life feel different," Ava said quietly. "Like $1 billion shift." Max looked up. "Turns out, all you needed was bad weather and takeout soup." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. Not a confession, not yet, but a beginning, just like the boats, fragile, floating, but pointed somewhere. The knock came just after noon, sharp, deliberate, and far too confident to be a neighbor or a package delivery. Ava froze mid-step, a cup of coffee warming one hand, her other hovering near the kitchen counter where her phone lay face down. The sound echoed through the penthouse like a dropped stone in still water. She wasn't expecting anyone. Not Max, not Lila. No one should have been there. She set the mug down gently, walked to the door, and checked the monitor. A man stood in the hallway, suited but slightly damp from the drizzle outside. His hair was slicked back, his smile polite but fixed. In his hand was a small notepad already open. The badge around his neck read, "Press." Her stomach dropped. She didn't open the door. She didn't even breathe, just watched. He knocked again, lighter this time, but persistent. "Miss Clark?" he called. "Or should I say, Ava Lane?" The name felt like glass, shattering in the air. Ava backed away from the door slowly, heart pounding so loudly she was sure he could hear it through the wall. She grabbed her phone, fumbling with the lock screen, pulling up the building's concierge desk. "Security," she whispered as soon as they answered. "There's a man on the top floor, press. I didn't authorize him." "We're on it, ma'am." But even after they assured her he'd be removed, Ava didn't relax. She stood behind the locked door and listened to the muffled conversation as the reporter protested, insisted he had the right, said something about public interest and disappearance. Her name was out there again. She was no longer a ghost. Back in the living room, she collapsed onto the couch, legs trembling beneath her. The calm she'd been building with Max and Lila, those quiet nights, those rooftop stars, suddenly felt like glass underfoot. Beautiful, temporary, breakable. He had found her. The headlines were coming. And she knew it was only a matter of time before Max would see her face not at his door, but on a screen beneath a headline that read something like, "Ava Lane, the missing billionaire reappears." Max wasn't the suspicious type. Life had taught him not to waste energy on what he couldn't control, especially when rent was due, and the car made a sound it definitely shouldn't. But lately things didn't quite sit right when he was with Ava. It started with little things. The first time he noticed the sound system tucked seamlessly into the penthouse walls, it had been playing soft jazz, almost like a whisper, under their conversations. But the brand? Bowers and Wilkins. He only knew because a guy at the garage once tried to sell him a used set. Just 2 speakers had cost more than Max's rent. Then there was the espresso machine in her kitchen, sleek and chrome, sitting like a throne in the corner. Max had seen one like it in a hotel lobby once, guarded like it was made of gold. He'd chalked it all up to inherited money. Maybe she was just one of those quiet, rich, old money types who wore sweaters that cost a fortune but still knew how to make pancakes. But it wasn't just the stuff. It was her. Whenever Lila asked questions, like why Ava had so many empty rooms or why she didn't have a dog, Ava would pause, not in a casual way, in a calculating way, like she had to remember who she was pretending to be. And then there were the phone calls. Last time, Ava had excused herself mid-sentence, slipping into another room. She came back 5 minutes later, smiling, but her hands had trembled slightly when she picked up her tea. Max didn't say anything then, didn't ask. He never pushed people who didn't want to be known. But now, sitting on the edge of her couch while Lila drew with crayons in the next room, he found himself glancing toward the hallway where her office door sat just barely ajar. Inside, he caught a glimpse of papers, blueprints, graphs, and a photo frame turned face down. He leaned back. He wasn't angry, not even suspicious in the sharp-edged way people got when they thought they were being lied to. But a quiet thought lodged itself in his mind, heavy as stone. Who are you, really? The rain returned with a vengeance that night, hard and rhythmic, drumming against the penthouse windows like it was trying to shake something loose. Ava stood in the living room, arms wrapped around herself, as she watched the city blur into watercolor through the glass. Lights danced in puddles below, distorted and fleeting. Behind her, Max and Lila were laughing, softly, gently, over a board game Ava didn't know the rules to, but had pretended she did. Lila's voice rose in excitement as she rolled the dice, Max responding with mock horror at whatever move she'd made. It was the kind of sound Ava hadn't realized she missed. Not since the boardroom wars, the press frenzy, the nights of silence after her father's death. Not since before. Now it was here, warm and immediate, and it made her feel like a liar. Max looked up, catching her watching. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, forcing a small smile. "Just tired." Lila yawned loudly, as if on cue. "Bedtime, Bug," Max said, rising and scooping her up in one smooth motion. Lila clung to his neck, drowsy but content. "Can Ava tuck me in too?" she mumbled. Ava blinked. The question was so small, so innocent. It nearly undid her. Max looked over. "Only if she wants to." "I'd love to," Ava said, voice catching at the end. 15 minutes later, with Lila tucked under the throw blanket on the sofa bed they'd set up for her sleepover, Ava found herself standing in the kitchen beside Max. The air smelled faintly of lavender from the candle she'd lit earlier. And something else. Warmth, maybe? Unspoken things. He leaned on the counter, arms folded. "She really likes you, you know." Ava looked at him, something soft but uncertain in her eyes. "I like her too," she said. "And I like this." He nodded. "Me too." The words rose to her lips, right there. "I'm Ava Lane. I disappeared because the people I trusted betrayed me. I didn't mean for you to get pulled into this," but the fear clenched around her like a fist. "Not yet." Instead, she whispered, "You make this place feel real." And Max, unaware of the storm behind her silence, smiled. "Funny," he said. "I was about to say the same thing." The email sat at the top of Ava's inbox like a loaded gun. Subject, urgent. Lane Technologies Board requesting executive dialogue. She hadn't seen the sender's name, Gregory Marsh, interim CEO and longtime board stooge, in months. Last she heard, he'd been fumbling his way through quarterly calls and appeasing shareholders with shallow smiles and half-baked promises. She imagined the panic now, thick and palpable, as the company's stock wobbled and innovation stalled. The empire her father built was slipping through their fingers. And now they wanted her back. She read the message twice, then a third time. "We believe your return would stabilize internal dynamics and restore investor confidence. Discreet re-entry, full authority, board support guaranteed." Ava scoffed. Guaranteed. That word had cost her everything once. She tossed the phone onto the couch and paced the room. The morning light streamed in from the balcony, but it didn't warm her. Not today, not with old ghosts clawing at the windows. They needed her. Not because they believed in her, but because they were losing. Because the press wouldn't stop asking where she was. Because even in absence, she had power. She opened the fridge, stared blankly at the shelves, then closed it again. She wasn't ready. Not yet. Not while she was just learning how to laugh again. Not while Lila was learning how to flip pancakes and ask questions that made her feel more human than any corner office ever had. Her phone buzzed again. A follow-up. This time from an assistant. "We can meet on your terms. Please advise." Ava sat on the edge of the couch, elbows on her knees, hands tangled in her hair. For a moment her mind spun with the image of returning, press conferences, a sleek black suit, headlines that called her a phoenix, a woman reborn. But then she heard something from the hallway. Lila's voice, humming softly to herself in the guest room, Max laughing in response, his voice low and warm. Ava exhaled. She picked up her phone and typed a single line. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm not interested at this time." Then she powered the phone off completely, set it face down, and walked toward the sound of something far more important than power. She wasn't ready to go back. Not when, for the first time in a long time, she was starting to feel like she was finally home. The garage smelled like motor oil, old rubber, and the ghost of gasoline, sharp and earthy, the scent of hard work and hours that never quite ended. Ava hesitated just outside the open bay door, her heels crunching lightly on gravel. She wasn't sure what made her come. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was the look in Max's eyes lately, tired around the edges, even when he smiled. She'd asked Lila where he was that morning. The little girl had answered with a proud grin and a mouthful of cereal. "Daddy's fixing cars at the noisy place." Now she was here, standing in her tailored coat, in a place that didn't know what to do with cashmere. Max was bent under the hood of an old red pickup, sleeves rolled to his elbows, grease on his hands, sweat darkening the collar of his shirt. He hadn't seen her yet. His jaw was tight, brows furrowed, a silent conversation happening between him and the engine. She watched for a moment, unnoticed, taking in the quiet intensity, the way he moved with certainty, like the machine made sense even when life didn't. Then he looked up, eyes catching hers, surprise flickering quickly to something softer. "Ava," he said, wiping his hands on a rag, "what are you doing here?" "I was in the neighborhood," she lied gently. "Figured I'd check out the famous noisy place." Max chuckled under his breath. "It's a little different from the penthouse." "It's real," she said, stepping inside. "It smells like truth." He raised an eyebrow. "Truth smells like transmission fluid?" "Apparently." He laughed, but it faded fast. She saw it then, what she hadn't before. The fatigue in his shoulders, the way he kept glancing at the time. A smear of oil across his jaw he hadn't noticed. He was holding it all together, but just barely. "How many hours do you work here?" she asked softly. "Depends on the day. Depends on what breaks." He didn't say because I have to, but it was there. In the pause. In the way he ran a hand through his hair and stared at the floor for half a second too long, Ava stepped closer. "You don't have to carry everything alone, you know." Max looked at her, something raw flickering in his eyes. Not vulnerability, just the ache of someone not used to being seen. And for a moment, surrounded by tools and grit and silence, she wished more than anything she could fix his engine too. The balloons were crooked, the frosting on the cupcakes was uneven, and the streamers kept peeling off the walls. But to Lila it was perfect. She twirled in the middle of the tiny apartment, wearing a paper crown and a sparkly purple dress 2 sizes too big, one Ava had found during a last-minute shopping spree and insisted she'd grow into. The living room had been transformed with bright pink and gold decorations, a handmade banner reading, "Happy 6th Birthday, Lila," hanging slightly off-center across the window. Max stood in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, watching the chaos with a kind of awe. Ava was on the floor helping Lila place star-shaped candles into a store-bought cake. Her sleeves were dusted with flour, and there was a smudge of frosting on her cheek she hadn't noticed. She was barefoot, laughing easily, completely at ease, in a space that was a far cry from her glossy penthouse. "All right," Ava said, inspecting the cake with exaggerated seriousness. "On a scale of 1 to 10, how magical is this masterpiece?" Lila studied it, squinting dramatically. 8.5. Ava gasped. "Only 8.5? Well," Lila said, grinning, "the unicorn's face is kind of melty." Ava burst out laughing, tipping back onto her hands. "Fair enough." Max couldn't help it. He smiled. Not just because the scene was sweet, or because Lila looked so ridiculously happy, but because he was seeing something in Ava he hadn't expected. Not the guarded woman behind locked doors, not the CEO in hiding, but someone who fit into this world like she'd been here all along. Messy, human, present. She looked up and caught him watching. "What?" she said, brushing a curl behind her ear. "Nothing," Max replied. "You're just full of surprises." She smiled, a quiet one, like she didn't want to say what she was thinking. But she didn't need to. It was there in her eyes, the warmth, the connection, the way she looked at Lila like she was part of her world now, too. Later, after the candles were blown out and cake crumbs were everywhere, Max found himself standing next to her by the sink, both of them elbow-deep in dishes. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for today." Ava looked at him, soft and sure. You don't have to thank me, Max. She's kind of amazing." "She is," he agreed. And as the warm water ran and the rain tapped gently outside, Max couldn't shake the thought. Maybe Ava wasn't just passing through. Maybe she was already home. It happened on a Wednesday, just past dusk. The three of them were huddled in the living room, the scent of takeout mingling with the warm vanilla of a candle Ava had lit earlier. Lila sat cross-legged between Max and Ava, eyes glued to the movie on the screen, something animated, loud, full of talking animals and impossible colors. Max was only half watching, more interested in the rare calm of the moment, the quiet rhythm of a normal evening that felt anything but ordinary. Ava had her hand resting lightly on Lila's back, tracing gentle circles through her sweater as the little girl leaned against her. The couch had become their unofficial headquarters, blankets piled, popcorn spilled, and the remains of dinner balanced precariously on the coffee table. "Daddy," Lila whispered, not taking her eyes off the screen, "can I have more juice?" Max made a move to get up, but Ava was already reaching for the glass. "I got it," she said, rising from the couch. "Thanks, Mommy," Lila murmured, her voice soft and automatic. And then silence, the kind that empties a room even when three people are still in it. Ava froze halfway to the kitchen. Max's breath caught. Lila blinked, confused for a second, before glancing up at her father, suddenly aware of what she'd said. I meant Ava," she mumbled, shrinking slightly like the word had betrayed her. Ava turned slowly, her expression unreadable. Not shocked, not upset, just still. Max met her gaze, heart stuttering in his chest. "I'm sorry," Lila whispered, her little voice cracking around the words. It just came out. Ava knelt in front of her gently, no hesitation. "Hey," she said softly, brushing a hand through Lila's curls. "It's okay. You didn't do anything wrong." Lila looked down, cheeks flushed. "I know you're not really—" But Ava smiled, full and quiet. "It was still the nicest thing anyone's ever called me." Max swallowed, something thick and unspoken rising in his throat. He wanted to say 1,000 things, but none of them made it out. So they all just sat there, close and quiet, the movie playing on like nothing had happened. But everything had. It started with a buzz. Max was in the break room at the garage, sipping lukewarm coffee from a chipped mug, scrolling mindlessly through headlines while waiting on a part delivery. Rain pattered lightly against the roof, just enough to make everything feel slower, heavier. Then he saw it. Found. Billionaire Tech. Heiress Ava Lane living under alias in downtown Penthouse. Exclusive photos. Sources confirm she disappeared following corporate fallout and scandal. What is she hiding now? His thumb hovered over the screen. His heart didn't race, not at first. It just stopped. Froze, like the world had gone silent except for the dull thud of his pulse in his ears. Ava Lane, not Ann Clark. Not the quiet woman who made pancakes and whispered bedtime stories to Lila. Not the girl who traced stars from her balcony and asked about his dreams like they mattered. No, she was that Ava Lane. He scrolled further. There was a photo, fuzzy, taken from across the street, but clear enough. Ava walking out of a florist, head low, bundled in a coat he recognized, the one she wore the night they watched paper boats sail in the rain. The article called her missing, secretive, reclusive. They painted her as dramatic, unstable, running from consequences, the kind of story people love to click on without understanding the cost. And Max, he just sat there, phone in hand, the truth unraveling in silence. It wasn't the money, it wasn't even the lie. It was everything she didn't say when she looked at him like he mattered, when she let Lila curl up in her lap and whisper secrets, when she let them both believe this was real. He didn't hear his coworker walk in until the guy slapped a greasy towel on the table. "You see this rich lady story?" he said, laughing. "Wild. I mean, who hides millions just to live alone in a penthouse?" Max stood, the coffee untouched. "Yeah," he muttered. "Wild." He left early, driving through the rain in silence, Lila's booster seat behind him empty for once. He didn't know what hurt more, the lie she lived or the truth she never trusted him with. The rain came down in sheets, thick and unforgiving, as if the sky itself had something to say. Ava stood just outside the revolving doors of the glass well, her coat clutched around her shoulders, hair slicked to her cheeks. She hadn't expected him to show up so quickly. She hadn't expected him to show up at all. But there he was, standing beneath the awning, soaked to the bone, holding nothing but the weight of questions she'd never answered. Max didn't say anything at first. He just looked at her, eyes dark, jaw tight. The quiet between them was louder than the rain. "You lied to me," he said finally, voice low, steady. Ava swallowed. "I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you." He laughed, short, humorless. "That's not better, Ava." She winced. Her real name on his tongue sounded different now, heavy, distant. "I was going to tell you," she said, stepping forward. I needed time. I didn't know how." "You had weeks," Max sapped, his voice rising just enough to make her flinch. "Weeks of dinners, stories, birthday candles, bedtime hugs. You let my daughter call you Mommy." The word hung between them, sharp and aching. "I never meant for that to happen," she whispered. "But I care about her. About you." Max shook his head, rain dripping from his brow. "And all that time, you were someone else, hiding up here while we trusted you." "I wasn't hiding from you," she said, her voice cracking. "I was hiding from a life that tried to tear me apart, from people who used my name, my company, and turned it into something I didn't recognize." He stared at her, unmoving. "I didn't want to be Ava Lane around you," she said. "I wanted to be someone who could just exist." "And what were we then?" Max asked. "A break from your real life? Something simple to pass the time until you put the crown back on?" "No," she said quickly. "No, Max, it wasn't like that." But he stepped back. "Maybe not for you," he said. "But for me and for Lila, it was real." She opened her mouth, desperate to bridge the space between them, but Max was already turning. "I trusted you," he said over his shoulder, "and I don't get to do that very often." Then he disappeared into the storm, leaving Ava standing in the downpour, alone with the truth and the sound of her heart breaking. The penthouse was empty. Max stood in the center of the living room, the echo of his footsteps bouncing off walls that suddenly felt too wide, too hollow. The curtains were drawn back, exposing the skyline in all its glass and steel glory, but the space that once felt warm, alive with laughter, pancakes, and quiet stargazing, was stripped bare of its spirit. No candles, no music, no Ava. He hadn't meant to come back. He told himself he wouldn't. But days had passed since that night in the rain, and something in him, stubborn, hopeful, foolish, needed to know. She was gone. There was no note, no forwarding address, no carefully folded goodbye on the counter. Just a half-empty mug in the sink and the faint scent of her perfume clinging to the air like a ghost that hadn't yet realized it was gone. Lila's paper crown from her birthday still sat on the coffee table, slightly crushed, a pink feather hanging loose at the edge. Max picked it up and turned it over in his hands, thumb brushing a tiny smear of blue frosting. He hadn't realized they'd left it behind. He wandered into the guest room, Lila's sleep-over space, and found it stripped. The blanket folded, the plush unicorn missing. Even the nightlight Ava had picked up just in case was unplugged, tucked into a drawer. Like none of it had happened, like they were just visitors in someone else's life. He sat down on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, the quiet pressing in around him. He didn't know what he expected. A goodbye, maybe. An explanation. A text. But Ava Lane had disappeared once before. This time she didn't vanish from headlines. She vanished from them. And all Max could do was sit there, in the emptiness she left behind, wondering what part of her had been real, and what had simply been borrowed from the pieces she'd tried to forget. The days blurred. Max was back behind the wheel, weaving through traffic with takeout bags sliding across the passenger seat and tired music bleeding from the radio. His car still leaked when it rained. The heater coughed on cold nights. And the tips were as unpredictable as ever, sometimes enough for gas, sometimes not. He was used to it. Scraping by was the rhythm of his life. It had been for years. But this time, the weight felt different. He didn't complain, not out loud. Lila still needed bedtime stories and warm waffles. She still ran to him after school with paint on her sleeves and questions about dinosaurs. She didn't ask about Ava, not directly, but Max could tell the silence was louder for her, too. She hadn't worn the paper crown since. He picked up extra shifts, doubled up on deliveries, went back to patching tires at the garage 3 nights a week. Every dollar counted, and exhaustion was easier to deal with than grief. At least that's what he told himself. But something in him felt hollow, not broken, just missing. It wasn't about the money. He'd never had much of that anyway. It wasn't even about being lied to, not really. It was about the way Ava had looked at him, the way she'd let him believe in something steady for the first time in a long time. A future, maybe. A home that wasn't just 4 walls and overdue bills. He'd catch himself thinking about the balcony, the night sky, the paper boats, her laughter when Lila called her the soup lady. He'd remember the way she brushed Lila's hair back like she'd done it 100 times, the way her eyes softened when she watched them together like she wanted to stay. But she didn't. Now, Max was just a guy behind a wheel again, delivering dinner to strangers, fixing cars for cash, making just enough to stay afloat. And every now and then, when the rain tapped gently against the windshield and the city lights blurred in his rear view, he'd wonder if maybe, just maybe, he wasn't the only one feeling the absence. But hope, like money, was something he'd learned not to spend too easily. It arrived on a Tuesday, one of those gray, forgettable afternoons where the sky couldn't decide if it wanted to rain or just sulk. Max hadn't expected anything in the mail. Bills, sure. A flyer for pizza he couldn't afford. Maybe another reminder about the expired inspection sticker on his car. But then he saw the envelope. No return address, no name, just his, written in looping, deliberate handwriting that looked like it belonged to a slower time. He turned it over in his hands, thumb brushing the edge like he wasn't sure if he should open it at all. He did. Inside was a single sheet of thick, cream-colored paper, no typed lines, just ink, blue slightly smudged in places, handwritten. Max, I'm sorry, not just for the lie, for the silence, for the way I disappeared when I should have stayed. You didn't deserve that. Neither did Lila. When I left my company, I told myself I was walking away from power, from control, from everything that broke me. I thought if I disappeared long enough, I'd finally feel free. But then I met you, and your daughter, and I realized something I wasn't ready to admit. I hadn't been hiding from the world. I'd been hiding from myself. You didn't know who I was, but you saw me anyway. Not Ava Lane, not the headlines or the company, just me. And for a while, I let myself believe I could have that. A quiet dinner, a laugh in the kitchen, a paper boat in the rain. You gave me something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. But I ran, not because I didn't care, but because I cared too much, and I was terrified. I don't expect forgiveness. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that what we shared, it was real. Every word, every moment. And if someday you're willing to let me try again, I'll be better, not perfect, not powerful, just me. Tell Lila I think about her every day. A. Max sat back in the kitchen chair, the letter resting on his lap, the silence stretching around him. He read it twice, then again. And for the first time in weeks, the hollow space inside him felt just a little less empty. Max was elbow-deep in the underbelly of a '99 Civic when his phone buzzed in his back pocket, twice, then once more, urgent and insistent. He grunted, wiped his hands on a rag that had seen better days, and pulled the phone out, squinting at the unknown number flashing across the screen. He almost ignored it, but something told him to answer. "Max Carter?" the voice asked, crisp and professional. "Yeah, who's asking?" "This is Daniel Ashford. I'm a legal representative based in the city. I'm calling regarding a private financial transfer made in your name." Max froze. "I think you've got the wrong guy." "No, sir. You've recently been designated as the beneficiary of a silent investment, specifically for a business entity listed as Carter & Co. Auto." The words landed slowly. Max's stomach flipped. "You said what now?" "A business account has been opened in your name. The funding covers a full year of rent at a commercial garage space, startup equipment, and an operational cushion. You'll find the property details in your email. No repayment is expected." Max sat down on a milk crate, breath shallow. There's got to be a mistake," he said. "I didn't apply for anything." "You didn't have to. The investor chose to remain anonymous, but left a message for you. Would you like to hear it?" Max swallowed. "Yeah, okay." The lawyer cleared his throat, then read, "Dreams deserve a little help. Tell Lila she'll have her own toolbox." Silence. The Civic hissed quietly above him, the smell of grease and old engine parts suddenly sharper than ever. Max closed his eyes. He didn't need a name. He knew. After the call ended, he sat in the garage for a long time, the letter from Ava still folded in his back pocket. The pieces were falling into place, not in the way he'd expected, but in a way that felt right. She hadn't come back with a press tour. She hadn't bought forgiveness. She'd believed in him, quietly, completely, and for the first time in his life, Max didn't feel like he was just fixing someone else's machine. He was finally building something of his own. The sign went up just before sunrise, simple, clean, hand-painted by one of Max's old buddies who still owed him for a clutch job 2 years back. The garage door was freshly painted, the walls scrubbed clean of years of rust and dust. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't big, but it was his. Max stood outside the new shop, keys in hand, heart thudding harder than he expected. The name had already been decided. He just hadn't expected that name. Lila tugged on his hand, her curls bouncing under her ball cap, a smudge of grease already on her cheek from helping with the final setup inside. "I like it better than Carter & Co.," she said with confidence, staring up at the newly hung sign. Max squinted up at the letters again. "Lane's Fix-It. Underneath, honest work, no nonsense." He shook his head with a chuckle. "You sure? It's not even our name." Lila grinned. "Doesn't have to be. It's the one that made everything happen." Max didn't argue, because deep down, he knew she was right. It wasn't just a name. It was a thank you. To the woman who vanished without slamming a door, who left behind a letter and a legacy and the quiet gift of belief. To the one who showed up in the rain with soup and stayed long enough to stir something real. People started arriving around 10. Neighbors, friends, the tow truck guy from across town. Someone brought donuts. Someone else brought a blown-out tire and an apologetic shrug. Max rolled up his sleeves and got to work, grease under his nails by noon, his heart a little fuller with every engine hum. By mid-afternoon, Lila had claimed a corner of the shop with a plastic toolbox, a clipboard, and a sticker that read Supervisor. She greeted every customer with, "Welcome to Lane's. My dad's the boss, but I'm in charge of cookies." Max laughed every time. He glanced at the sign once more, then at the space around him, people chatting, tools humming, sunlight catching the window just right. It wasn't just a garage, it was the start of something new, and somewhere, he hoped, Ava knew she had never really left. The rain was back again, steady and familiar, tapping on the windshield like an old friend with bad timing. Max pulled the delivery bag tighter across the passenger seat as he turned off the main road and onto a quieter street on the edge of town. The kind of street where things closed early and the neon signs buzzed a little softer. The cafe was tucked between a thrift store and a boarded-up bakery. He'd never delivered here before. It wasn't even on the usual rotation, just a one-off order from a customer who hadn't used the app in a while. The name listed was Elaine. At first, he didn't think anything of it. Then he saw her. Through the cafe window, beneath the dim amber lights and next to a chipped ceramic mug, Ava sat alone. Her hair was damp, curling slightly around her face, and her coat was draped over the back of the chair like she meant to stay for a while. She didn't look up immediately, just cradled the mug with both hands, staring at the steam like it might give her the words she still didn't know how to say. Max stepped through the door, the bell above it chiming gently. Rain followed him in, dripping from his jacket, soaking the cuffs of his jeans. He stood just inside, frozen in place. Ava looked up. Their eyes met. There was no rush, no dramatic gestures, just a quiet stillness between two people who'd been through the fire and were now standing on the other side of the smoke. "I didn't know how else to reach you," she said softly, "so I ordered tea." Max blinked, the corner of his mouth tugging upward. "You always did have a thing for dramatic entrances." Ava smiled, small, nervous, real. "Can I buy you a cup?" He hesitated just for a moment, then stepped forward and slid into the seat across from her. Outside, the rain kept falling, but inside, something warmer was beginning to take its place. The cafe was quiet, the kind of place that hummed with low conversation and clinking mugs, where time felt slower and the rain outside softened into background music. Max sat across from Ava, hands wrapped around a warm cup of black coffee he hadn't touched. He wasn't cold, he wasn't tired, he was just there, waiting. She looked different tonight, not because of the rain or the simple sweater she wore, but because she wasn't hiding behind anything. No false names, no guarded pauses, just Ava, bare and honest in a way that felt more powerful than all the headlines that once screamed her name. "I should have told you sooner," she said quietly. "I was scared, not of you, of losing what we had, of ruining it." Max didn't say anything at first. He looked down at his hands, then back up at her. "You didn't ruin it," he said, "but you broke something. Trust, it's slow to build, even slower to rebuild." Ava nodded. "I know, I'm not asking you to forget it, just to let me earn it back." She reached into her coat pocket and slid something across the table. A small envelope. Plain. No markings. He opened it and pulled out a photo. Lila standing in the new garage, grinning, wearing a tool belt 3 sizes too big and a name tag sticker that read, "Manager in Training." Max stared at it, then laughed under his breath. "How did you—" "I stopped by, didn't stay, just watched through the window for a few minutes." She smiled faintly. "She's happy. You're building something beautiful." He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't see the woman who left. He saw the one who showed up, again, despite everything. "Why now?" he asked. Why come back?" "Because I'm done running," she said. "From my name, from the company, from people who see me. I want something real, Max. And I think that's you." The rain outside slowed to a whisper. Max leaned back in his chair, the weight in his chest easing. "No aliases," he said. "No disappearing." She nodded. "No secrets." They sat there in the soft glow of the cafe, steam rising from their cups, a second chance warming in the space between them. This time they were starting from zero, and this time it would be enough.